Scooter is a standing exercise where we are focused on hip flexion, knee flexion, so general lower extremity alignment, strength, and stability in those positions, as well as working our hip extensors on the leg that's moving, so glutes, hamstrings, posterior part of the leg, and our hip stabilizers on the standing leg. For springs here, you can really work with any single spring. I think a standard is either a blue or a red for a little bit more challenge, but you can go heavier than that for more challenge or lighter than that for just a different type of challenge. For our setup, you'll have people bring their leg out to the side of the carriage, standing leg, for the other leg to tuck back on the shoulder block. So this inside knee is off of the carriage completely, standing leg down on the floor. This is an important place to note that everybody's legs are different lengths. The parts of their legs are different lengths. And this position is going to look a little bit different for everyone. So my standard is to have people put their foot up on the foot bar, to stand next to the frame, or sorry, not the foot bar, the shoulder block. Stand next to the frame. And then we want to try to line up the thighs side to side. Maybe that this inside thigh is a little bit more in front, but we want to make sure that you're not standing way in front of this back leg or way behind it where we're in a hip flexion here. So just standing upright. And from there, we sink the hips back as you bend the knees forward. So this is essentially a squat, right? We're in hip and knee flexion. Then you can tap one hand to the foot bar for a little bit of extra support. Hips are nice and square. And you just press back through the inside leg and slowly bring that carriage in. So the rest of this shape is standing still as we move the inside leg. From there, to add challenge, you can bring both hands off of the foot bar so that the standing leg is having to work a little bit more to keep you in this position. And there are also places here where we can start to add rotation. We can add arms to add more challenge. The biggest common problem we see here with Scooter is just the setup position. So one of the things we'll see is people kick the hip back and they just have this front leg straight, which you could do as an exercise, but we're not getting all of that standing hip work here. So making sure to cue people into this squat position is going to be really important so that they know that this front leg is bent as we're moving. The second common problem we see is that people move all the way out and in. So they're pushing with their body and this front leg versus holding the shape and then moving the back leg. So again, just cueing that we're stabilizing with the rest of the body as we move one leg at a time. As we come out of our Scooter exercise, Eve stretch is a great way to give people a nice stretch and work some flexibility and mobility in that same position. So you can typically do your Eve stretch on the same springs that you've just done your Scooter on, but typically one red or one blue feels nice for people, and they can add or subtract just based on what feels good in their body. So our setup is similar to our Scooter, but typically feels nice to have the foot maybe a little bit farther forward. Still parallel, toes facing forward, back leg, toes tucked on the shoulder block, very similarly. This time we can bring both hands to the foot bar and just bend into essentially what is a lunge position, right? So we want to square off the hips. And I like to start with the knee off of the carriage. This is kind of the more traditional variation. So we want to make sure we're staying in a range that we can keep the hip square and keep that leg up. So we're really working the hip extension on the left leg, and then that the chest is nice and lifted. So a lot of times people will kind of push way back like this, but this is where we're going to get your hip extension, and we get a nice psoas stretch here, hip flexors, all the way up through the spine as well. From here, we can also drop the knee, and then you're able to sink a little farther into the front leg, which can be a nice stretch for this outer hip, right? This one is a little bit more stretchy sometimes, whereas when we're lifted through that leg, this outside hip is really having to be active, which is one of the reasons I love this, because it's an active stretch. But after that, it can feel really nice to just sink down and let the knee drop so you've got more support from the springs. And from there, if people would like to, they can shift their weight back. But again, leading with that chest forward is going to give that back hip flexor a nice opening. And then we can even kind of lengthen up through the spine as we come out of that to get more of that stretch through the front hip. And then lastly, we can push back with the front leg straight and the back leg straight for more of a standing split, knee lifted or knee down.